Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for your goodness, for the kindness that you show to us every day. We're thankful for the hope you've given us in Jesus, and we're thankful for the examples that he has set for us when he was here on the earth. We ask for your help tonight as we study your word, that we can be strengthened, we can be encouraged, and that we can learn to do the things that you would have us to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Make sure the master slide is up right in front. You got it. Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We're going to most likely finish up this chapter in our study of the book of Ecclesiastes tonight and potentially then move on into chapter 2 as well. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. And as we've been discussing the various aspects of this chapter, and the writer of Ecclesiastes is somewhat interesting in his conversation. Does he have, if you just read it on the surface and read quickly and didn't see the kind of the moments where he would change thought occasionally, what kind of mindset would you have that the preacher, the Ecclesiastes writer, has about life and things in general? It's pretty nice. It's not very good, is it? Okay? His experiences have been such that there's kind of an overlying theme, and it's what? What does he say? Yeah, that's right. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity, saith the preacher. And so here's this mindset that preacher, the Ecclesiastes writer, had, that after experiencing many things, he makes a conclusion that all of his efforts and all the things that he tried to experience in life really eventually become very vain when you look at them. We kind of identified the writer as whom? Probably Solomon. We can't say that with 100% certainty because he doesn't specifically identify himself in the book, but there are identifying markers, like the fact that the writer is the king in Jerusalem, okay, and a reference to whom else? Son of David, okay. A lot of discussion about wisdom, a lot of discussion about wealth, a lot of discussion about the fact that no one could compare to the kind of wealth and prosperity the writer had. And so there seems to be a lot of internal, circumstantial kind of evidences that point to this as being Solomon. And many times in my discussions throughout this book, you'll see me lean that way, because that's what I believe Solomon to be the writer of the book. And I believe that gives us a better perspective on why he writes what he writes. And so if you hear me leaning that way a little bit, just kind of accept that that's my mindset about it and why we point to certain things in connection with that. In verse 14, he says, I've seen all the works that are under the sun, and behold what? All was vanity and vexation of spirit, he says. What's the word vexation mean, by the way? That's King James, by the way, on the screen. What's it mean to have vexation of the spirit? Troubled, right? Challenged. And so he says, all these things have brought challenge and difficulty to my spirit. And a lot of effort is put forth sometimes, and he says, verse 15, that you can't do what? That's right. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. We spend a lot of time trying to accomplish and fulfill things that are impossibilities. And the impossibility that the writer has been pursuing is he's tried to find happiness and contentment and benefit in life by pursuing it in what way? After what kinds of things? Material, worldly pursuits. And at the end of that pursuit, he says, empty, empty, empty. It's all empty and doesn't have the benefit that I thought it would. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. That's right. And we see that very specifically when we get in chapter 2. He'll make a very specific statement to the fact that with God, that's where the real benefit is. And with myself, my own personal ambitious thoughts, emptiness comes from that kind of mindset. What did he acknowledge then? This is question 11. What did he acknowledge then that he had attained in verse 16? Okay, he says, I communed with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. By the way, if we're right in making the conclusion, this is going to be important in chapter 2 as well, but I want to introduce it now. If we're right in making the conclusion that this is Solomon writing these things, where did he get his wisdom from? Why did he get wisdom from God? That's what he asked for. If you remember, Solomon was about to be made king, and God comes to Solomon and says, ask whatever it is you want, I'll give it to you. And Solomon asks, I need to guide and judge over your people. I need wisdom in order to do that. So God says to you, okay, wisdom you'll get, and wisdom's all you'll get. No, that's not what he said. What did he say? That's right. You didn't ask for wealth and longevity of life and all the kinds of things that people would have thought of to ask God for. Because you asked for the right thing, then I'll also bless you in other ways as well. And so I want us to keep framed in our minds that there had been a wisdom extended unto Solomon that came directly from God Himself. And you see this internal struggle maybe just a slightly different way if you recognize that kind of overwhelming picture. That if this is Solomon writing these things, this struggle that he has is about his flesh, it's about what he thinks, and it's about the wisdom that God has put in him as well. There's a lot going on in the mind of the writer, and we'll see that kind of come to the top as we talk about different aspects throughout the book. And I think there's a level of that. We'll get into that a little more actually in chapter 2 because there's an interesting kind of statement that he makes that we'll explore in this battle with wisdom and other things. We'll get there. So he said, I pursued all these things. I communed with my heart and said to myself, great things have happened. I've gotten wisdom above others. I've come to this great estate. Verse 17, and I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. All kinds of things, madness, folly, wisdom. The writer applied himself to many, many different disciplines, if you will. And seemingly every time they were centered in himself, they brought an emptiness with it. For in much wisdom, he says, is much grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I have any doubt necessarily. I'm just willing to be fair, that because I don't have a name on it. I got plenty of evidence, but just not a name. Yeah, it sounds like everything points to him. Everything points to him. So what conclusion then did he draw? In verse 18. Okay. That pursuing after a lot of wisdom isn't always what it might sound like it's going to be. With that wisdom and with that knowledge comes a grief and sorrow. It has some challenges that come along beside it, along the path as well.
Now, this is pretty much a worldly wisdom he's talking about now.
I would tend to agree to that. Right. The wisdom of God would not bring grief and sorrow and challenge. Most likely that's his emphasis, is that his personal pursuit of wisdom, worldly wisdom, and madness and folly and those things that are connected to that.
In the book of Solomon, you see how he made several mistakes by letting this desire take him over.
Yeah. His history bears out the words that are being spoken here.
Do you think this is written later in life?
Yeah.
After he'd fallen away somewhat with the wives and things of that nature?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is an older Solomon looking back on life, is my view of how he's writing this. Yeah. After he'd experienced it all, now he can go back and kind of examine it and look at it and write about it, all the things that he experienced. And I'm not trying to just skip this section, but it's the same theme that keeps carrying over into chapter 2, and we can talk more about it there. So when you get to chapter 2 then, how would you characterize this particular chapter? Main thoughts that you saw. Okay, he had it all and still was empty. Okay, what else might you see as a main thought in the entirety of the chapter? Okay, wisdom without God is no wisdom at all, you see in this chapter. Self-indulgence is never a good thing. Okay, worldly satisfactions don't help. A lot of very poignant, important kind of principles that are shared here in this text, and we'll see them unfold as we examine the text itself. Verse 1, I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. And therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great works, I built houses, I planted vineyards, I made gardens and orchards, and planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house, and also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I had men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do. And behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. And then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. Then said I in mine heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? And therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me. For all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun? This is also vanity. And therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This is also vanity and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner He giveth travail to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. And so that's the next section of the Ecclesiastes writings. And when he began this particular segment, and again, he's not writing chapter 2, verse 1, but he writes this letter, or this book, and he begins in this segment by saying that there are several things that he sought out. What sorts of things were they? Okay. In verses 1 through 3, he lists several different specific things. It's question 2, if I tricked you on that. Okay. There we go. Laughter, pleasure, wine, things of the flesh, as Judy already said, mirth or merry-making. All the things that we generally would think would make you what? Happy. Laughter, mirth, joy, pleasures. Things that entertain us. Things that are earthly in their pleasure. All the things that men would conclude that if I had access to all that all the time, I couldn't help but be happy. What's he say? That's right. Didn't work. He said, didn't work. I had the ability to pursue happiness in the manner that all men wish they could pursue. And I'm here to tell you, the writer says, it didn't work. It's vanity. I've experienced it all. We'll see that later in its context. But I've experienced it all, and it didn't work. I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly. And it just didn't work. You know, it's interesting. In some ways, that's an interesting statement in verse 3. I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly. The writer complicates it by trying to hold on to both elements simultaneously. In some ways, he's able to see the vanity of all in a clearer fashion because he's trying to be both. He's trying to embrace and continue in the wisdom that God has blessed him with, but also pursuing the things of men, which just makes the problem even worse than it would be if he would have just stayed with God, number one, or if he had just relinquished that and sought after folly. It's kind of painful to seek after things that God in His wisdom would be telling you to avoid. You're challenging and you're hurting yourself. But it's an interesting kind of dynamic to what he says about himself, because there's this attempt to balance the two and to try to maintain a level of control while being out of control. And it's kind of an interesting mix that he attempted, that he eventually finds out is not really all that beneficial. And what does he say at the end of verse 3? What was this all about? It's not a question on your sheet. Yeah, he wanted to figure out what should I do with my life. Ever asked that? More than once? Yeah, right. We've all probably been there. We've asked that question about what am I here for? What am I about? Who am I? You know, those are fair questions. And sometimes, you know, what do you think a midlife crisis is about? You wake up one day and you're not so sure who you are anymore. Who am I supposed to be? What have I become? Why do you think that parents have empty nest problems? Because for a long period of time, your whole mindset was devoted to what? Those children that were in that home. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and the children aren't there anymore, and now I got to figure out what? What am I about? I'm not really the parent I used to. I'm not really that guy anymore. And so who am I? And so we go through that. And so that's really what the writer kind of says. He said, I just pursued anything and everything, trying to figure out what my life was about. What should men really pursue in their lives? What should they really go after that would bring them the best benefits? And that's God's the answer. And he'll say it. It's very brief, and you got to kind of catch it when he says those things. But he does say that, and he recognizes that in the narrative.
The New Testament passage says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." I think it appears that Solomon had so much that he kind of came forward.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'm just going to try see what happiness I can find out here."
Right.
But he leaving God out of it when he did that.
Yeah, his ability to pursue things was limitless. And the kind of side thought to all that, Roger, to us maybe should be that we ought to be, instead of asking God, give me limitless resources, maybe we ought to be thanking Him that He didn't. Maybe we ought to be thanking Him that you did not give me limitless resources, that you have confined me to my circumstances, maybe for my own good. Maybe for my own good. Because what I might do with too many blessings might be here.
I've got that little poem that always runs in my head. It's not what I would do with a million if a million should ever be my lot. It's what I'm doing at present with the dollar and 40
Hey, God. and there's truth to that. What am I doing with what God has blessed me with? And sometimes we're benefited without that limitless control. Yeah. In the absence of God, there will never be contentment. And that's a quality, Diane, that I don't think a lot of people recognize. That we wonder why the world and society, in a sense, becomes the way it is. And it's rooted in this lack of contentment, which is rooted in the erosion of God from the society. God increases, people will become more contented with that simple relationship, and better things happen. So what things did he accumulate then during all this search? Verses 4 through 8 illustrated. It's question 3, I believe. I'm sorry, 4. Okay, all the typical kinds of things. What were they that he listed here? Houses, vineyards, gardens, parks. All right, lots and lots of things. Money, okay. Let me show you if I can get it on the screen here for a second. Just to kind of give you an idea. These are called the pools of Solomon. They are not the pools of Solomon. They call them the pools of Solomon, but archaeology showed that these just don't date far enough back to be actually Solomon's. They're probably more from the Maccabean time period rather than clear back to Solomon. But I'm just showing it to you to give you some imagery of what he's talking about. Because this would have been the kind of thing Solomon would have had. He would have had these pools along the way. Notice what's over here. On this side over here. It's forest. What did that text say? Yeah, I've got these pools. And I've got a... How many of you have a garden? How many of you plant a forest while you plant your garden? Right? Here's the row for onions. Here's the row, and then here's my forest. Right? Solomon, that just gives you a mindset of what... Solomon didn't have to go to 84 Lumber. Solomon had his own forest. Okay, Solomon had his own access to anything and everything. Solomon didn't go to Jebiah's market to get his fruit. Solomon walked out into his vineyard and got fruit. Solomon walked to whatever fruit. The text says, fruit trees of all kinds, vineyards. Solomon didn't have a place to stay. He had many houses to stay in. You ever just go on vacation and you start looking at where you're going to stay? And the options seem to just be kind of limitless, and you just see them all, and you go. Now that we got, back in the day, 20 or 25 years ago, your place to stay was already in your driveway. It was your camper trailer, right? You hooked it up to the back of the car or truck or wherever you had, and off you went, and there was your place to stay. But nowadays, you look at that, and here's where we could stay. Or look at this house, or look at this. And you say to yourself, wow, what it would be like if we owned all of them. Or I could stay one night in all of them. Solomon could. Solomon could. The imagery I'm trying to just help us appreciate is that, and it's hard for us to even see it, is that when we say it was limitless, it really was limitless. Uh-oh, I've lost my, where'd it go? Oh, there it is, I think. There it is. So, anything you can imagine he had. Anything. Houses, vineyards, gardens, you name it. He had access to all of it. And then not just things, but he had what around him? Servants, people. Okay? Servants, maidservants, men servants. If Solomon wanted to hear a song, he didn't get his iPod out. What did he do? You three, play me a song. No, don't like that one. You three, sing me another one. That's what it was. That's who he was. And so the writer of this book, concluding it, Solomon, had everything at his disposal. Let me make sure I catch that phrase in the text. Very end of verse 8. He says, and the delights of the sons of men, the delights of the sons of men, as musical instruments and that of all sorts. The delights of the sons of men. Whatever that day would have had that delighted men, Solomon had times 10. And it was still vanity. It's still vanity. It still left him hollow and empty and challenged. Verse 9, he said, how great did I become? Or did he become? And so I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. And here's the key. And what? And also my wisdom remained. And again, I point you back to the fact that if this is Solomon, that wisdom would remain because it came from God. God had blessed him with it. The ability to make judgments and decisions and choices. Solomon had wisdom. And going back to chapter 1 a little bit, I want to be careful I frame this because I don't want you to think like that Solomon's, that I'm giving him a pass. But even the wisdom that God had blessed him with seems to be consuming him, has seemed to have consumed him now. Where everything that it just is overwhelming to him. I've been through all these things and the grief and the sorrow and all the challenges that it's brought, and I didn't embrace that well enough, so I decided to pursue it with all these other things. He's a very overwhelmed man. Not that God is at fault, not that Solomon could not have stepped up and embraced the responsibilities that God had given him, but he is a very overwhelmed man when he looks back at all the things that he experienced. Yeah, I think he's like anybody else. Even though God's blessed him in very specific ways, he still's got to sort his own way through it. And when he looks back, he sees, I didn't do so well at times. Well, and I don't know that when he says till I might see what was that good, for the sons of men. I think the simple reference just is that he pursues anything and everything to figure out the way men should. What's the best way for men to live? What's the best things for them to have? What's the best pursuits? And I did it in all kinds of ways. I pursued it in all kinds of ways. And so, and I don't. To me, he's just saying, I attempted everything. I looked at everything to try to figure out what was the best way to live, and found most of it was useless along the path. No, I don't think he's giving himself a reason. I think he's just saying this is why this whole pursuit got started. I was, and I don't think be careful. I don't know that the word good. Don't think righteous. I don't think we should think righteous when we see good. We should think what would men think is good? What would man think is a good way to live? Man would tell you right now, who's got it better, Brian Price or Bill Gates? Bill Gates, right? Man would tell you Bill Gates has got it good. Brian Price, doesn't. So that word good, I don't see it as righteous. I see the word good there meaning what's the best in men's minds the way to live. What's good to men? Yeah. Good to men, not good to God necessarily.
Solomon wasn't sinning in all this. He was excessive.
Well,
He wasn't sinning.
I would humbly disagree with that.
No, if you think about it, he's the king. And all of these resources are at his disposal. And yes, he had concubines and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But this is considered, a book of wisdom. And he's basically said, I've been there, done that guy, and it's not worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I think the language would imply it's vain because it's without God. If it's without God, it's sin. If it's disconnected from what God would deem as righteous. And I think we could find plenty of evidence in Solomon's life where his practices were sinful. His idolatry with the wives that he chose. There's lots of things. So I just simply humbly disagree with you. I think that it is sin. I think when he talks about these things, he recognizes that wasn't the wisdom of God coming out in me. That was men coming out in me. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there could have been all kinds of factors. Yeah. Sure. And I'm not saying every action was sinful. I'm just saying sin is involved in the life of Solomon. I don't think everything he did wasn't sinful, but it's a motivating factor in much of this, as far as I can tell. Go ahead, Kevin. You had a thought earlier.
Yeah, in reference to what Bob was struggling with there in verse 3, we have to remember here that, as you, I think, are trying to point out, Solomon's still dealing with what we consider worldly wisdom.
Yeah.
What was good for me as far as worldly wisdom was concerned.
Yeah.
What choices were good.
Yeah. And from man's eyes, in that connection. Yeah. Been in my house, haven't you? Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to kick this around too far, but yeah. And I'm not saying you're a sinner if you have a storage facility. You're about to think I'm about to say that. But you think about it. What precipitated the need for these pop-up storage buildings all over the landscape? We got too much stuff. We got so much stuff. We got to have a place to store. And you think about how crazy it is sometimes. The $20,000-$30,000 car is sitting in the driveway, and the $150 worth of yard sale stuff is sitting in the garage. I remember when we were in Moundsville, my neighbor noticed that we were always going in and out of the garage with our car. He said, I had my car in my garage, and he had two huge, double-stalled, huge. He said, I haven't had my car in a garage in 20 years. I said, you got too much stuff. He says, you're right, but guess what? I don't think I never saw a car in a garage. Whole time. Solomon, that's what he's talking about here. That we can become so overwhelmed with just accumulate. And let's be careful. Now, I realize that maybe you downsized, maybe there's something going on, you needed a place to put some things, or maybe you got a bunch of stuff given to you and you had to put it somewhere. I'm not being critical here, I'm just illustrating that we need to be careful sometimes that we're not in the pursuit of accumulation, because the writer is very clear it's not going to work out good. Yeah. Well, and add verse 10. What did he say he had gotten? That's question 6. Anything his heart desire. I can remember one time we were coming back from a basketball game. Dad had taken a basketball team, I think. We must have been playing, maybe played like at New Matamoros, and he had gone down into St. Mary's and crossed the bridge, and we were coming up, and he stopped at this little Dairy Mart down there and was going to treat the team. And it's always funny to me that I don't remember how many guys were with us, not the whole team, but 5 or 6 guys, how many ever there were. And I remember Dad going to all of them and said, whatever you want, whatever you want. And he grabbed me by the shirt. He pulled me over here and he said, you get a hot dog and a fry and a small Coke and be quiet. And so I always remember that they were drinking milkshakes and having a hay old time. But whatever you want, that concept, whatever you want. And we think about how wonderful that would be. We even have phrases for it. Kid in the what? You're like a kid in the candy store, right? Just woo, here we go. Solomon said it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. We might think it would just be great and wonderful and just awesome. It's not worth it. That's right. And then you're stuck with the bellyache. And that's what Solomon says. You're stuck with the spiritual bellyache.
Just one real quick thought, Ron. If we go back to Deuteronomy 17, where Moses, of course, is going over the law for the new generation. And he tells them when they go into the land, they're going to want a king. And when you get this king, these are the things that the king should not do.
Yeah.
List them for us. The king shall not do this, shall not do that, shall not. Well, all these things that Solomon did were almost in direct violation.
He was doing the very things that God had warned the people, you don't want this guy. These pursuits aren't going to be good for the nation or him. So what then was the reaction to this great accumulation of wealth in verses 10 through 11? What was his? That's question 7. Okay, vanity of vanity. It's all vanity, and it's like what? Striving for the chasing the wind. Okay, that's a long chase, right? And chasing the wind. I mean, it just is never ending and never successful. Never has an end and never has any success along the path. So what conclusions then were drawn about the value of wisdom and folly from verses 12 through 16? It's kind of a two-edged sword in some ways. Because he says on one side, wisdom is what? Wisdom excels folly. If you're going to choose one, wisdom's better than folly. But he says, in that pursuit, remember one key thing. What is it? Right, notice he uses the word event, singular, which to me the language implies death. Death is the great equalizer. Death puts everybody in the exact same spot. No matter how wealthy you were or how poor you were, death puts you in the exact same spot, waiting on the judgment from a Creator. Puts us all in the exact same spot. It's the great equalizer. And even if you had the wealth and prosperity to provide yourself a little longer life than the poor, And let's not throw our heads in the sand and say that doesn't happen, because it does. Money can buy you better access to health, and I'm not saying right or wrong to that. I'm just saying it's a reality. But even at best, might add a year, 2 years, maybe even 10, maybe even 10 good ones. But at the end of the day, death eventually wins over everybody. You can't buy your way through it. You're not going to win over that. It's the great equalizer. And it's that event that everybody needs to So wisdom's better than folly, but don't convince yourself that wisdom will make you superior over the great equalizer. Don't think that wisdom will somehow grant you some great ability to overcome the one thing that nobody gets past. And that's the end of one's life. As it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. You know, when he says that, I see a man who maybe at one point in time thought he could escape it. I see a writer, Solomon, almost as if to say, even me. You know how humbling that is when we come to that moment in life where we realize, oh, what I thought applied to everybody else just hit home, that I'm just as subject to that as well. And that seems to be the kind of moment that he has in verse 15 to me. He first just kind of generically says it, that this great event happens to the wise and the fool and the rich and the poor, and he equalizes it all out. And then he makes that statement that he finally is coming to terms with that himself. That he can't pursue his way out of the ultimate. And what's sad is he has spent a lot of time and energy trying to do just that. And vanity. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, always vanity.
This was a hard thing for Solomon to understand. I think he's finally come to the conclusion, I've tried all this other stuff that doesn't work, because same thing happens to me that happens to a fool.
Yeah.
We're both from God.
Yeah.
And then the question is, I think, I don't know if he asked it, he said, then whose shall this be?
Yeah. Eventually he'll talk about all that energy you spent and what you leave behind and how will they handle what's left. We probably won't quite get there tonight, maybe close. But he says, in verse 16, though, add that last thought. And step back from it a little bit, because he says that you can pursue all these things, and death is a great equalizer. And then what else does he say about all that? That there's no remembrance. There is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? There's probably some wisdom language in that, because on one side you might make the argument that here we are in the year 2014. Who are we talking about? We're talking about this guy. Here we are talking about it. Well, he just said there wasn't going to be any remembrance of him, but we're just now talking about it. So so that's not what I see. What I see is that at the end of the day, death basically made the rich man just like a fool. He's equal to him all of a sudden. He was never in life his equal. But there's nothing profound or that really makes him better. And that idea, notice, and I just a thought that I had when I was studying, for there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Maybe there's some wisdom in the guidance that when it comes to forever, which is eternity, God. Forever is eternity. So when it comes to eternity, rich fool didn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. Rich man, foolish man, both are going to stand before God and be judged in the same manner, by the same statutes, by the same system, by the same measurement. And maybe that's what his implication is. There's no remembrance in that eternal sense of whether he was rich or poor or a fool or wise. It's all about whether or not he honored God with his life. And that's the way I viewed it. Because, I mean, if it's literal, then that doesn't make much sense to me, because here we are talking about it. Yeah. Here's the rich man, and instantaneously death equalizes them. And then after judgment comes to each of them, they end up in their respective places.
He said essentially the same thing in the 11th verse of the first chapter. There is no remembrance of former things.
Yeah.
There is remembrance of things that are coming with those that shall come after.
Yeah.
What do all these worldly things want to do for us?
Right.
Maybe to somebody else.
Right. And I suppose that what's important in all this is to remember the comparative language that's going on. If we isolate a statement, we're going to probably miss it. If we try to isolate a single statement and say, well, here's this statement and this is what it means, if we don't understand it in relationship to every other piece that he gives us, we're going to miss something. But here's the question then, as it were, bell's about to ring. How do I react to that? How do I react to this knowledge that when it's all summed up, we all what? We all die. Yeah. 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 They won't be isolated forever as the only one to have done this, that, or the other. And he speaks to that. Yeah, the education we receive from it. All right, we'll pick up, Lord willing, then in verse 17, which is question 9, if you're marking it on your question sheets.